a little bit about what we're going to do now. Like we did last week, we're going to be doing a slightly different format than the normal dotChurch you maybe are used to. We're going to be doing a debate, and it's going to be a live debate, two different people, each one representing an opposite view of each other. And the people in this debate may or may not actually agree with the side that they're arguing for. So like Albert said, you're going to have to see if you can figure out, do these people actually agree with what they're saying or not? But the goal is that everyone gets strengthened, gets stretched a little bit. One of the main core tenets of dotChurch is that we really want to help people teach people how to think, not necessarily what to think. So a lot of churches, they approach the Bible and they say it's super cut and dry. It's really black and white. Our interpretation is the correct one. And then there's lots of other churches that disagree with them. And we can all still be Christians, still follow Jesus, and even disagree on some of these big issues, as we're going to see tonight. So the issue, as Albert said, that we're going to be talking about tonight is, can Christians ever support violence? And so there's lots of different ways that this comes up, depending on maybe what side of the political spectrum you're on. That might lean one way or the other to the answer, or just in general, how you were raised, maybe the church that you were a part of. Christians saying, yes, we should go to war to defend the values of Christianity, or we should use violence to defend ourselves, or sometimes preemptively, we should go out there to protect justice or freedom in the world. And then there's a lot of other Christians who say, no, the picture of Christianity is nonviolence. The picture of Christianity is turning the other cheek, as Jesus says. And so we're going to get into the thick of it, and we're going to have two different people. Mason Harris is going to be representing the side of nonviolence. Taylor Bradman is going to be representing the side of, we're calling it necessary violence. There's not really a great term. There's a lot of different subcategories of people who say Christians can support violence. The just war theory is one of them. Maybe you've heard of that if you've been in this topic at all. But the goal for tonight is not to exhaustively cover every possible side of this issue. The goal is actually to get you intrigued enough that you're like, I need to look into this more, and I'm going to do some of my own research. I'm going to go into this, and now I feel a little bit more amped, and I want to look into it myself. So if you're listening and you have some strong opinions, you might think, why didn't they get to this and get to this? We could make this 4 hours long, be like the Joe Rogan podcast or something, and just talk until all of you want to die. Or we're just going to cover a slice of it, and I'm hoping that you're like, I really want to get into this more, because really my goal, the heart behind this is I want you to be studying the Bible more. And I don't really care if you end up at the same places that I end up. A lot of people ask us, well, what is dotChurch's position on this and this and this? We don't actually hold positions like that. You kind of have to go person to person, because even among the dotChurch leadership team, we have differing views about a lot of this stuff. And that's okay, because we're trying to demonstrate the tent of Christianity is a little bit broader than sometimes you've seen. A lot of people walk away from Christianity, deconstruct, because they think there's only one little slice, and they say, I can't be a part of this because of X, Y, and Z. When in reality, Christians have been disagreeing about these things for lots of years. And we're united not by a set of theological doctrines that we all check the boxes on. We're united around Jesus. So that's the heartbeat of this. So just a little bit about the format. We're going to give each of them 2 minutes to do some opening statements about what their view just encompasses, because some of you are coming to this cold. You're like, I never even thought about this. And that's totally fine. And then from there, we're going to go question by question. And all of you who are watching, we're going to do the Zoom polls, and you're going to be able to vote. Which view did you find most compelling? And then at the end, we're going to have you vote finally and say, did you change your mind based on anything in this debate? And if everyone says no, it'll be very sad. So we'll see. We're going to see if people's minds are willing to be opened and stretched. So there we go. So let's start with the opening statement from Mr. Taylor Bradman. And I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock. And hold on 1 second. Let me get this ready. We're going to get some little bit of technology going. Hold on. There we go. All right. So Taylor, feel free to unmute. 2 minutes on the clock. Give us just an overview of your view.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. I will likely not use the full 2 minutes, but as Anthony said, I'll be defending the view that kind of contains that violence, whether it's self-defense or times of war, is permissible, but also supported in the Bible. there are numerous examples in the Bible that support self-defense and wartime violence. And for just as a quick example, the Old Testament teaches in both Exodus and Leviticus that if a neighbor injures another neighbor, the person doing the harm must receive the same, what do you call it? The same type of inflicted injury. So if let's say that if person A decides to go harm his neighbor and cuts off his left arm, that's to person B, then person A, by law, must have his left arm cut off. So that's an example of self-defense in the Bible. It's not the kind of self-defense that maybe we are used to thinking of, but it's definitely a form of it. And that was Israelite law. And then in terms of war, there are several war narratives in the Bible. So in the Old Testament, you have the books of Joshua, you've got Judges, you've got Samuel, you have Deuteronomy, chapter 7 and 20. These are the most cited passages in the Bible to justify war. Later on in church history, St. Augustine coins the term just war, and a lot of Christians kind of believed in that theory, and a lot of different denominations as well.
Time. Okay. Thank you, Taylor. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Old Testament law covering a lot of great ground. Violence is sometimes necessary, sometimes even supported biblically. Now we're going to flip to the opposing view. My good friend from Arkansas, Mason Harris, is going to be representing the view for nonviolence. 2 minutes on the clock. Take us away, Mason.
So the story of the Bible as a whole is centered around God and his relationship to the Jewish people. The Jews had been conquered by Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Greece, and by the 1st century Rome in Jesus's day. Prophets of God told of a coming Messiah who would free the Jews and all peoples subsequently from oppression. By the 1st century, many Jews had taken these prophecies to mean that the Messiah would be a war king, that he would come with a sword on horseback, calling the Jews to take up arms against their oppressor and wipe out whichever empire was in control at the time. Many so-called messiahs had arrived and fought against their current oppressive power and claimed to be the fulfillment of the prophecies, but one by one, they all dropped dead and just weren't the Messiah. But then Jesus arrives, not on horseback, but in a manger, not with a sword, but with a shepherd's staff, and not calling warriors to come fight, but calling tax collectors and fishermen to love their enemies. Jesus of Nazareth, who we call the Prince of Peace, was far from violent. And if we take our discipleship or our apprenticeship under him seriously, I argue, the Christian nonviolent stance argues that we as Christians should not ever at any point use violence. And I think we actually have the definition of violence. Anthony has it, but I yield.
Great. Yes. So Taylor, Mason, and we talked beforehand and we said we should probably come up with a good working definition that we can all use as we talk about violence. So I'm going to drop it in the chat, but it's basically this. Here we go. Coming in the chat. It is basically an intentional overcoming of someone's consent in order to physically harm or kill them. So that spans a lot of things. That spans police, that spans army, that spans interpersonal, defensive, aggressive sometimes. And so that's kind of the working definition that we'll use. But right now, I just want to take stock of where everyone's at. Having just heard these two brief different sides, we're going to do a poll. And it basically is, which view do you personally hold at this moment? And we did this on Instagram. And I think it was like over 80% said they say violence is necessary sometimes, and Christians can support it. And we're going to see how closely it mirrors what you guys have to say, how closely our broad Instagram audience versus the people who actually are here. So I'm seeing them come in. Let's see if we can get close to 100% voting. I think the hosts cannot vote, unfortunately. All right, I'm going to end it. 72%. So here we go. Pretty split down the middle. I'm wondering if people would have voted differently on Instagram had they heard Mason's defense that he just gave now, because we just asked cold and it was a big swing in the direction of necessary violence. So we've got 56%, 44%. Are you guys seeing that right now or no? Now you probably see it. There we go. Okay. So everyone, we'll come back. We're going to take a poll at the end. So now, first question that I would love for each of you to answer, and we'll start again with Taylor. The first question is, how would you support your view scripturally or theologically? So how would you go to the Bible, or broad interpretive method of how to interpret the Bible, specific passages, or maybe broader? And how would you support your message? So we're going to say 3-minute timer, because I think I have to change it. Can I do that? Here we go. So 3 minutes on the clock. Taylor, take it away.
Yeah, so I mentioned a few passages in the Bible from the Old Testament, but what about the New Testament? There aren't many explicit New Testament passages that talk about self-defense or war, but there are several implicit examples. And as Wayne Grudem points out, he's a big systematic theologian. For those who don't know, he's written a lot of books. In his book, Christian Ethics, he points out that Jesus's disciples carried swords after Jesus's death and resurrection. And this is significant because in that day, in that first century, swords were primarily used for self-defense. And also in Acts 10, some of Jesus's followers were officers in the Roman army, such as Cornelius. And in Hebrews 11, some of the heroes of our faith that we turn to were soldiers. Among this list is King David, who is also the person that killed Goliath, and is also the only person in the Bible to be named a man after God's own heart. And if this were not enough, there is a book mentioned in Numbers 21, and that book is titled The Book of the Wars of the Lord. Now, we don't have this book anymore. It's lost to us, but the very fact that it exists and it contains all of the Lord's wars and all of his acts of warfare shows that war is a necessary part. If it was a product of evil, God would not engage in war. We know that he doesn't do evil. But we also know that whenever the Lord does engage in warfare, it's a means of attaining justice. So to me, that's telling, because there are times where war and self-defense, they are necessary means to enact justice. That's about all I have. So you've got 30 seconds left. So take it away, Mason.
Great. Okay, Mason, rebuttal, opposing viewpoint, 3 minutes on the clock. Give it a go.
So scripturally speaking, we as Christians believe that God has an ideal version of life for humans. We see it in the garden, and we see it at the end of time in Revelation. This ideal can be described as peace on earth, or shalom. But it was disrupted when sin entered the world. Sin took away peace. It pushed peace out. So if you claim to be a Christian, which means you claim that Jesus brought heaven back to earth and that we now live in it, then you should refuse to be violent, just as you refuse to lust or lie or gossip or worship other gods. In terms of government, we see how Christians are supposed to interact with the governing authorities when we read Romans 12 and 13 in light of one another. In Romans 12, Paul speaks directly to Christians in Rome and tells them, don't conform to the pattern of this world, hate what is evil, be devoted to one another in love, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse, live in harmony, do not repay evil for evil, live at peace with everyone, do not take revenge. And then in Romans 13, it's a lot. In Romans 13, Paul shifts from using the pronoun you, which is in reference to the Christians, and he begins to use the pronoun they to refer to the government. They are God's servant, agents of anger to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. It's obvious that Paul is describing two people groups, Christians who are to love enemies, and governing powers that God uses to punish enemies. Therefore, the two can't overlap. Christians can't claim to be used by God to punish evildoers, nor should they want to. Theologically speaking, there are only two kinds of people you could take life away from: Christians and non-Christians. If you kill a fellow Christian, how dare you? You've ended a brother's life and ministry. They can no longer bring anyone to Christ. And if you kill a non-Christian, how dare you? You have made it impossible for that person to ever come to know Jesus. You've, in effect, sent that person to hell, which means you claimed to be the judge that day. You claimed to be God, which is blasphemy. I say, if we can, we should sacrifice our own life in order to save the other person. We know where we're going when we die. It's better that I die than anyone else. And when I live my life ready to die for someone else, I feel like that's pretty Christ-like. It reminds me of what Paul said in Philippians 1, that for a Christian, it doesn't matter whether we live or die. If we live, great, we can continue to spread the gospel. And if we die, great, we get to be with Jesus in heaven. Death cannot defeat us. So instead of living like we have a right to end someone else's life, let us live as those unaffected by death. And I yield.
Last week, they kept saying, I yield my time. And I was like, this is great. I didn't say to say that. Nobody said to say that. And everyone started saying it. And I was having a blast. I'm like, this sounds way more official than a bunch of people in a Zoom room, but I'm here for it. So if you guys want to say, I yield my time, I'll support you. So, okay, great responses. We're going to take a quick poll of the room of everyone in here. I'm going to send this out. Second poll question. Which argument did you find the most compelling between the two? Launching the poll. Give us a go. Let's see how many people we can get. You have to choose one or the other now. You can't say, I don't know. Pick, even if it was 51% one person, 49%, pick that person. So let's go. Here's the results. 74% non-violence. Very interesting. Now, keep in mind, Mason and Taylor may not actually agree with the view that they're arguing for. So you may be proving the opposite person's points true, or, like what they're actually after. So a lot of intrigue in dotChurch on Tuesday night. Okay, next one. Next question is a little more broad, but could get very pointed depending on it. We're going to try to keep this cordial. Why is your view superior than the other person's view? So we're going to see all sorts of different appeals, maybe to emotion, maybe to logic, maybe the Bible. Who knows? Which way is it going to go? So Taylor, we're going to start with you. 3 minutes on the clock. Why is the violence is sometimes necessary argument for Christians stronger than the nonviolent argument? Take it away.
Yeah. So why is my view superior? Well, it's the majority view. I mean, isn't that how we decide like trivial matters? No, in all seriousness, guys, I think it's telling that if self-defense and war, acts of violence, if they were not allowed, if they were sinful and a product of sin, Jesus's disciples would stop carrying swords when they met him, when they started following him. But they didn't do that, and Jesus never condemned them for it, for arming themselves for self-defense. Secondly, we would not have Cornelius in the book of Acts. He's a soldier in the Roman army, yet it says in Acts 10 that he is a worshiper of God and he's a God-fearing person. His whole family is a God-fearing family. And that's in the Bible. And that's not, the reason that's in there is because God tells Peter to go minister to Cornelius and his family because they've yet to receive the Holy Spirit. So God is saving people in the Roman army. And also our heroes of the faith in Hebrews 11, some of those are soldiers. And if Christians could not be soldiers, they would not be our heroes of the faith. As simple as that. And so I think that's why I think my view is superior, because there are so many examples of God-fearing characters in the Bible that engage in war and also are prepared for self-defense. And that's what I have.
You got to say the phrase.
Yeah, I don't like that, but I yield my time.
You don't have to say it. It's okay. Okay, Mason, why is your view superior to the other view? So maybe talk a little bit about why the other view is wrong. So 3 minutes on the clock. Give it a go.
Just to quickly start. Taylor said that there's not a place where Jesus condemns them for carrying swords, but we see when Jesus is trying to get arrested, he says, gather up as many swords as you can find. They got a couple, and he says, that's good enough. They come, and when Peter cuts the ear off of the person trying to arrest Jesus, you could see that as a situation where, Peter is trying to defend the innocent. Jesus is innocent. He's trying to save his friend from being wrongfully arrested. And Jesus immediately points his finger and says, he's not yelling at the centurions or the Roman soldiers or the Pharisees or anything. He just starts yelling at Peter, and he heals the man's ear and puts it back on him, saying, hey, we don't do that. That's not what we're here to do. That's what I'm not here to do. He was there to take violence upon himself, not to enact violence on anyone else. I don't believe Christians are allowed to have the preloaded mindset, like, well, if this guy pulls anything funny, I'm ready to kill. Being prepared to kill has no place in the transformed heart of a follower of Jesus. If you follow Jesus, your hand shouldn't be hovering over a holster, prepared to fire at anyone who threatens you at any instant. You shouldn't be prepared and ready at a moment's notice. Sorry, you should be prepared at a moment's notice to love your enemy, not fire a gun or anything like that, swing a sword. Not having a second thought toward giving them some money or offering them a hot meal or a place to stay. We're fine with loving our enemies as long as enemies is defined as people who get on our nerves, and loving as long as that's defined as just don't hold anything against them. But that's not what either of those words mean. Love others even unto the point of death, even when someone may want to kill you. When you do this, you become more like Jesus. You become closer to Jesus than most other Christians throughout the world. Romans 5:8 says, while we were still his enemies, Christ died for us. In Jesus's day, when a Jewish teacher called someone to be his student, the call was to become a near clone of the teacher. They were expected to follow the teacher around wherever he went and copy everything he did. Not just memorize the lessons that the teacher taught, but copy literally everything down to their hand gestures. The word Christian literally means little Christ. We are supposed to be carbon copies of him. And Jesus defined peace. Even though Israel was praying for a violent war Messiah, Jesus came and refused to be violent. He condemned violence, both on a national and an individual level. And instead of spilling the blood of his enemies, he poured out his own blood for them. A non-violent Christian is more Christ-like than a violent Christian. And violent Christian is an oxymoron.
Bam, right on the end of the time. Man, you guys are both just bringing up such great points. Another poll for everyone listening. Which of these views did you find more compelling? The poll is coming your way in 1 second. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. Launching the poll. Let's see what people are getting. 25%, 33%, 40%. 48, 50, 55, 60, 62. Let's see if we can get a couple more people. 66, 74. All right, I think that's about as high as we've seen. 77, we're getting more people voting. 81, look at this, shattering barriers. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. The 5 who are holding out, maybe that's the hosts. All right, here we go. A sweeping reversal, 82% Mason for nonviolence, 18% necessary violence for Taylor. Okay, this last section that we're going to talk about, we're going to try to open it up a little bit. And so I'm going to open it up to you guys who are watching right now. If you have any questions for either of these folks for their views, because I remember they may or may not hold them personally, I would love if you would send them in. And we're going to take maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes to respond to some of the questions that you might have. So start thinking about those, start dropping them in. Because Mason has been dominating so far, at least in the polls, I'm going to throw out a question to Mason, and we'll just be curious to hear. And then Taylor and Mason can interact a little bit together. And then as you were sending in questions, we'll take some of yours. So send some in. If you're in the chat, drop some in. Mason, here's my question for you. What do you think should Christians be relying on, the kind of like the outsourced violence of like the police? So like, for example, let's take Donald Trump. A lot of Christians supported Donald Trump, even though he didn't really reflect Christian values in a lot of ways. So people support him because they said he'll kind of be like, he'll get us like things done. He'll protect freedom. He'll protect Christianity. He's the pro-religious candidate. We've sort of outsourced our support of so that we don't necessarily have to do those things. Someone else does it. By taking a nonviolent standpoint, but living in a country that has police and military and stuff like that, haven't you just outsourced it to the people around it? Does that make sense?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
To me, it sounds like those people are putting their hope in Trump instead of in God and what he can do. Hope in the government, hope in the military, hope in police, which like we're not supposed to do. And to outsource it, I mean, I'm not prepared for this question, but honestly, because of the whole Romans 12 and 13 thing, it's almost like, yeah, we outsource that to the world, to the governments of our world, because as Romans 13 puts it, God uses these powers, these governments, these nations to punish evildoers, wrongdoers, and each other. And it kind of seems from the reading of it that Christians are supposed to just, wash their hands of it and let God deal with nations on a national level. And our job is to love each other on an individual level, and to just keep our hope in God, not in government, not to have political idolatry or anything like that.
Thank you, Mason. And I know, Mason, you're someone who likes to think and prepare and be ready. So thank you for taking that question off the cuff. Taylor, I have a question for you from Laura Bradley. She asks, can you give more New Testament evidence for necessary violence? Where are there places in the New Testament where it seems like there might be a lot of violence? I'll give you a hint. If you want to talk about Revelation is the last book, there's a lot in there, but you can feel free to take that any way you want. What are your thoughts?
So I would consider Revelation to be different because that's not Christians doing the violence. That's Jesus judging the world as he rightly should be. As far as more New Testament references, this is like this is kind of where this argument falls apart. There really aren't many more New Testament references for necessary violence. Part of that is because in Matthew 5, when Jesus is giving his sermon, he flips the Israelite law on its head, where Israelite law said eye for an eye. Jesus says, no, that's not how I want you to live. That's not a characteristic of my followers. And Jesus says when someone hits your right cheek, turn the other one. And what he means by that is his followers, when they're met with violence, we're to respond with love, grace, and mercy. We're not supposed to do the same thing for them. And this is also a theme in the Old Testament. There are several passages in Proverbs and a few other places where the biblical writers are quoting the law, and then they're saying, yeah, let's not do this. Let's not be violent if we can avoid it. So there is a bit of a marked difference between how Jesus's followers are to act. So there's not a great argument in the New Testament for necessary violence outside of Jesus avenging and using violence as a means of justice.
Taylor sounds like he maybe is revealing his truth feelings. We got some good questions for Mason. Mason, let's see if you want to tackle one more of these. Let me tell you them, and then you can decide which one you want to respond to. Beverly said, what's the difference between God's judgment and violence? Which that might open up a whole new can of worms. Vince says, Mason, you wouldn't use violence against someone who is about to attack your family. I want to hear, what are your thoughts on that? Just like in personal life, self-defense, like obviously we see in the Bible and in the early Christian church, there's a lot of martyrs. So Christians are like, I'm willing to go to be executed for my belief in Jesus. I'm not going to fight back. You can, kill me. But what about protecting other people? Like, how would you respond to that if you're a Christian when you got someone else?
I think a lot of this debate comes down to hypothetical situations, and three kind of, well, there's when someone's attacking you and self-defense, that's one of them. And then when someone is attacking innocent people, and that's the second one, like how do you interact with that? And in terms of like, if I had a family and somebody was trying to attack them, which I know that happens in the world, but I've never had it happen to me. Most people I know, pretty sure it's not really a common thing. But if it does happen, I will say that it's funny, Taylor it seemed like he was deferring and kind of arguing for me. Now I'm going to actually end up kind of sounding like I'm arguing for Taylor. But we need to, like, we have to recognize the root word of pacifism is not passive or passiveness, it's pacify. It's like detaining. You can take someone down. And I think even with our definition of the word violent, if my intention is not to harm this dude, if he's got a gun pointed at my wife or something, I'm single, by the way. If dude has a gun pointed at my wife, I can bear hug him. I can tackle him within my view, because I don't believe that is violent. My intention is not to harm this guy. It's to stop him. It's to detain him from hurting other people. And say the gun went off and he does do something he might regret later. I'm saving him from his future regret. I'm saving him from sinning in that moment. And I think those things are things that Christians should fight for and aim to do. We can be pacifists in that we refuse to be violent and intentionally harm people, but we can still save someone from their own regret and save an innocent life by tackling. My view's main point is to get us away from this mindset that so many Western Christians, Americans in particular, have of like, oh, if you do it, the moment you cross, into my property, or the moment you point a gun at someone I love, I have every right to pull a gun on you and kill you. I'll kill you before you have a chance, like a preemptive strike. And that mindset is dangerous. It's not Christian. It's not what Jesus wanted. And I think that's kind of where I'm revealing where I'm at. This is where I personally land on it, that like pacifying someone is fine and it will save a life. It's good. But anything past that, any sort of intentional harm is violence, and Jesus abhorred violence.
Yep. Mason and Taylor, I just want to say thanks so much for you guys engaging in this. I had a blast. I thought both of you had so many good points throughout. And like I said, this is a contentious debate that has been going on for thousands of years. And so just to give everyone listening an example of the extremes, you've got very early Christians, like Justin Martyr was one of them, who is basically saying, throw me to the lions. If you want to kill me for being a Christian, I'm not going to fight back. I'm not going to do anything. I'm ruthlessly committed to this. And then you can fast forward, and you had in the 1930s or 40s, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, famous Christian, was in Nazi Germany and actually helped in a plot to assassinate Hitler. And he was a Christian, deeply committed to Jesus, and he was essentially saying, I feel like we need to do this to save all these lives. So it's not cut and dry. It's not black and white. And like so many issues in the Bible, there's a lot of nuance, there's complexity, there's situational things going on, brings up questions about theology and scripture. And so our goal is not to confuse you and say, everything is wibbly wobbly, and so nothing matters. The point of it is to say, when you were young, if you went to church, you maybe were in a church that said, here's all the right answers. And when you left that church, a lot of people meet other people who think very differently. And they're like, wait a minute, I can't be a Christian anymore because those were the wrong answers or whatever it is. And I want us to be critical thinking Christians who can actually wrestle with these things, look into them ourselves, wrestle with them with other people, and then hopefully develop some conviction. So I think we have a lot of people on both sides of this debate who have heavy convictions. I mean, we saw that on Instagram poll, and we've seen that in this. I'm going to do one final closing poll, and it's basically, you maybe came in with some ideas, and now maybe if you left, have those ideas changed. So did you change your opinion from when you started? Just launch the poll. Let's see what everyone says. Share, here we go. So 95% of you said no, you did not change your opinion, and one of you said yes, which makes me think some of you are not being honest, potentially, because those numbers were almost 50-50 at the beginning, and most of them pivoted. So maybe someone is not being honest. That's okay. There's grace here. But whoever that one person who said yes, I'm very proud of you for sharing your opinion and being open. So we're going to wrap up this conversation. Thank you again to both of you. Lots of great questions came in the chat. We're sorry that we can't get to them. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Buller, who's going to wrap our night up with prayer, and then Albert's going to close us out. So thank you both. Put in the chat. Thank you to Mason and Taylor for engaging in this crazy experiment. And Rachel, feel free to unmute and take it away.